Scientists call that binary. They're one thing or they're the other. Either you is or you ain't. What about belief? Is belief a binary thing? Is it just either one thing or the other? Either you have it or you don't. You know, this morning in our scripture reading, we read of an interesting tale of Jesus and a man who had been, a son who had been suffering with a terrible affliction. Demon possession had caused his son to be unable to speak, to have seizures, to put himself into danger. And yet this man is wanting Jesus' help, and Jesus tells him that help can come through his belief, but yet at the same time, he doesn't believe. Yet he desires for a bigger belief. I do believe, help my unbelief. What was this statement? Was it a paradox? A contradiction? What can we learn from this man's faith, where it was and where it needed to be? Well, to understand it, we need to go back to the very beginning of this story. And in Mark chapter 9, we read the story starts when Jesus, being separated from his disciples, comes back. And in verses 14 through 18, when he comes back, he sees that his disciples are surrounded by a large crowd. And there's some scribes there. And there's a very big argument, a very big discussion going on. When Jesus comes up, the crowd peels off and goes to him. And Jesus asks them, he says, what are they talking about over there? What are they discussing? Well, that's when this man pipes up and says, I brought my son to them. He's been suffering with this possession. It's caused him not to speak. It's caused him to have these seizures. It's caused him to be thrown on the ground and to foam with the mouth. And I begged and I asked and I told your disciples, get rid of this demon. But they couldn't. You see, what we see here is a lot of different viewpoints. Scribes seemingly are using the failure of the disciples to say, maybe Jesus isn't who we thought he was. Maybe his disciples are being defensive, trying to explain what's going on, even though they themselves don't know. They had the authority to cast out demons. We see that from earlier in Matthew chapter 6, verse 7, that Jesus had given this authority. But here, now, in this situation, it's not happening. Jesus' response is, in verse 19, O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him to me. O unbelieving generation. Now the question here is, who exactly is Jesus talking to? Is he talking to his disciples? Couldn't cast out the demon? Is he talking to the scribes who see this point as an utter failure? Is he talking to the people themselves? Well, it might help us to look at some of the parallel passages. In this same event occurs in Matthew chapter 17 and in Luke chapter 9. And Jesus' answer in both of those passages gives us a little more in depth of what he said. Not only does he say unbelieving generation, but he also says perverted generation. Oh, unbelieving and perverted generation. The words here signify not only just an unbelieving, a lack of faith, but also one that had been twisted, perverted, corrupted. You see, with the scribes and their gleefulness, almost that here Jesus' disciples are failing. And they're almost happy about it because now they have something against them. You see it with his disciples who are failing here. And they're trying to defend themselves. They're being defensive. They're trying to make sense of it all. You have a father who's just wanting his son helped. You see, what we see here is how do we respond when things don't go the way they're supposed to? You see, belief is easy enough when there's no push on it. There's no difficulty with it. It's easy to believe when everything goes the way it's supposed to, right? But it's when things don't happen the way we expect them to that we begin to wonder about our belief. What do? Do we give up? Well, it's not the way it was supposed to be, so it obviously isn't working. What I thought, what I believed in, what I had faith in isn't there. Do we make excuses? We try to come up with some excuse, some reason to say, well, that's the reason why. Do we get defensive? Do we try to justify something when we don't really know? Do we begin to doubt? A little seed of doubt that causes us to wonder, that causes us to be confused. See, that's the story that leads up to our scripture reading. When this man is desperate for a cure, and he thought he had it, but now it's not seeming like it's going to work, and everyone is confused, and everything is happening, and he goes to Jesus, and Jesus says to him, how long? He turns to that father and he says, how long has this been happening? The man answers, from childhood. From childhood. And it's not just that he can't talk. It's not just the seizures, but when he has them, this entity causes him to hurt himself. He throws him into the fire. He throws him into the water. He tries to destroy him. Could you imagine what that would have been like? Could you imagine if that was your child? And here's the most precious thing in the world to you, and yet something's not right. Child's in misery. You can't turn away from him for a second, and he's putting himself into danger. Could you imagine how difficult it would have been for this man for so many years dealing with this from the very moment he was born to the very moment now, how hard his life would have been because of this? You can understand why he asked Jesus, if you can do anything, take pity on us. If you can do anything, help us. And then we see a rather peculiar response by Jesus. He says, if I can, all things are possible for him who believes. If. It's interesting because this response, it reminds me of when in a historical event, when Philip II of Macedonia was conquering the Greek regions, and he came to Sparta, the famous warriors. And he sent them a message, and he said that I intended to come. And he said, if I bring my army into your land, I will destroy your farms, I will slay your people, and I will raise your city. And the Spartans responded, if? What were they saying? Well, if you're not sure, we're not going to do anything about it. If you come, well, that's a big if. They didn't seem much to think about what he said, because for some reason they thought he was doubting because he said if. And that's similar here to Jesus' response. If, do you really think I can do something about it? If you truly believe, all things are possible. If. It's the danger of doubt. Doubt is like a bug in the flower. It's not much, but if you leave it alone, it'll destroy the whole sack, won't it? It's like the hole in the roof. Little by little, it will let in enough that next thing you know, you have a pretty big problem. It's doubt. James talks about this in James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. When he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives generously without reproach, and it will be given to him. But, he says, if you ask it, you must ask in faith without doubting. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That man not expect that he would receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded, unstable in all his ways. It seems James is sitting here saying, well, don't even bother. Why? Because James here is realizing that if we have that doubt, that unsurety, that it keeps us from truly relying and truly trusting on what God says. You can see this later in Jesus' response, as we said in the other account in Matthew chapter 17, When he tells his disciples later, because of the littleness of your faith, for truly I say to you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say from this mountain, move here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. Why was it so important to let go of that bit of doubt? Because a foe that is uncommitted is a foe that is easy to defeat. If you have a leadership that is wishy and washy, they'll never get that people to act. If you have an infantry that's really unsure whether they should go, they're never going to lead that charge. If you have a person who lets their doubt control them, they're never going to get that far. But notice the man's response. I do believe, help my unbelief. How can he sit here and say, hell, I believe, when at the same time he's saying, but you got to help me in my unbelief? Because you see that it's important. You got to believe. But you also can understand that even in that belief, it may be weak. It may be little. It may be small. And it may need to grow. But you need to have it. Because in that faith, even as small, even as weak as it was, God could do something with it. God can make something happen. It's to have that faith. Years ago, I struggled when I first started in ministry because I would oftentimes have people and they would come and ask my advice on things that were way outside my bailiwick. They were way above my pay grade, right? They would ask me things that they were needing advice on something, and it was one of those tough life decisions, that might have a spiritual component, but was way bigger than anything that I could tell them. And I would struggle because I know these people were coming and asking me for advice, and I didn't know what to tell them. People would come and ask me about decisions they were making that were with a loved one and what they were going to do about a medical situation. They would come and ask about something with the decision they're making about what they were going to do with their kids or some of these other things. And I think, I don't know what to say. And I don't remember who gave me the advice. I don't remember if I read it or who told it, but it has been one of the truest things, one of the biggest helps for me. And they told me, they said, it was basically this. It said a lot of times when people are coming and they're asking for your help in a decision, they usually already know what they need to do. What they're really asking for is someone to trust and support them. And they said, in trying to give somebody advice, just tell them, whatever you decide, it'll be the right thing. Whatever you think you need to do, it's what you need to do. And it's really what people are looking for, is they're looking for someone to say, I believe that you can do this. I believe that whatever you decide is right. And I wonder sometimes if we're making God feel trusted and supported. That's what people are wanting, right? They're wanting to be trusted. They're wanting to be supported. And I wonder if we do that with God, when we want to put something on God, but yet we're very quick to say, this is how I want it and what I want. Do we really believe in God? Because, we have to realize that God's going to know more and understand things far greater than we do. And the response that we may be thinking that we need or is there is actually one that we're quite unsure. Sure, we want help, but are we trusting that God's going to give it in the best way? It's that faith that's not, this will happen, but a faith that says, whatever does happen, I understand God is in control. It's interesting because as soon as this man expresses this, I believe, help me in my unbelief, Jesus goes to work. He sees the crowd gathering. He rebukes the unclean spirit. And this spirit it doesn't go easy, does it? It throws the boy into another convulsion. It does something terrible, so much so that he's lying there perfectly still. And what do they say? They said, well, he's dead. Jesus takes him by the hand and raises him up. Isn't it funny here, even after Jesus showed what he could do, the response of some people was, well, that boy's dead. He's made it worse. What's he done? The same thing can make one person believe and another believe less. But yet Jesus was doing something. But you know what's interesting in this passage is the Father wasn't the only one who was struggling in his belief, but yet struggling with his unbelief. Because the same thing was happening to the disciples, wasn't it? Remember, this all started because the disciples, even though they've been given authority over unclean spirits, were having trouble casting this one out. And after all the situation in verses 28 through 29, when they go to the house, when they leave the situation, they come to Jesus and they begin to question him privately, saying, why could we not drive it out? How come we failed? How come we couldn't do what we thought we could do? And Jesus' response is this interesting. He says, this kind cannot come out by anything but prayer. He didn't really tell them why. He just says, this was a tough one. You know, sometimes the translation says this cannot come out by anything but prayer and fasting. As we see, he talks about don't have that little faith, have a bigger faith. But he adds this idea that these can only come out by prayer, fasting. What does that mean? When we think about prayer and fasting, we think about spiritual disciplines, right? Things that we dedicate ourselves to, things that we put effort into. You know, oftentimes people think about a prayer as a one and done thing, right? I said a prayer, that should handle it all. But that's not the way the Bible talks about prayer, is it? You know, think about Ephesians 6 and 18 where it talks about being pray at all times in the Spirit. Being alert in perseverance. Right? Here it's not just talking about a casual one-time thing, but something that you are focused on continuing to do. You are praying and you're continually praying and you're praying hard and you're praying a lot. And that's what Jesus was saying to the disciples. To do something like this, there's a lot more to it. It isn't just the easiest path. Because here's Jesus acknowledging something I think we all know deep down. Some things are just tough. They're not over in a moment. We don't get through them in an instant. Our lives are not that situation comedy where the problem presents itself and is all wrapped up in a nice tight bow by the end of the 30-minute program, right? Because some things that we go through, some struggles that we have, they have been going on for a long time. And we suffer through them from a long time. That child had been that way from childhood. That father had gone through days and nights of misery. Some problems are like that. They take a time. Because the walk of faith is one that goes through the hills. It goes through the ups. It goes through the downs. There are times when we're walking and everything seems easy, and then there are times when it's just uphill the whole way. When there are those struggles and those difficulties. And our faith isn't as strong as we hoped it would be. And it wears us out. But it doesn't mean that we lose it. We believe, but we need help with our unbelief. That we can trust in God, but we can know sometimes through the difficult times we struggle. Because faith is something that we have to have. We have to believe. Because in believing and trusting, we put that commitment to God, right? We put our faith and trust into God, that we say, you know what? I don't understand everything of why it's going on. I don't have all the answers. But I knew that I can trust in Him. And my faith may be small and it may be weak, but it can grow. And if we continue to trust in Him and we continue to walk and we don't give up, that even that little bit of faith can grow into something far greater. And God can use that little bit of mustard seed, that little tiny spark, and He can grow it into something greater. You know, sometimes the hardest thing to have faith in, the hardest thing to deal with is ourselves. Can I make it? Am I good enough? Is there a chance for someone like me? In Luke chapter 18, we see Jesus dealing with a man who everybody would have thought would have been the perfect person, a rich young ruler. Kept all the commandments, done everything he's supposed to, but yet he had a problem, right? It's his riches. They were getting in the way. And when Jesus tells him, hey, maybe you need to let go of those things, he has trouble. He can't do it. And for his disciples, it's shocking because their thought is if this guy who has everything going for him, if everything's going right, if he can't be saved, then who can be saved? But notice what Jesus says in Luke 18 and verses 26 and 27. When they heard this, they said, who can be saved? But he said to them, all things are impossible. All things that are impossible with people are possible with God. The hardest thing is who can be saved? Who could be? How could I be saved? You don't know what I've done. You don't know what I'm like. You don't know how I struggle. If it was just you, then you might be right. But it's not just you. You see, what is impossible with men is possible with God. The things that are impossible with people are possible with God. But it requires of us to put our hope and our trust and our faith in Him. And not to say, God, this is what I want and just do it for me, but rather to say, God, I'm going to do it what you tell me to do. And I'm going to walk the way that you have me to walk. And I'm going to live the way that you have me to live. And I'm going to do what you have me to do. Even if I don't understand it all. Even if I'm not sure. I'm going to put my hope and trust in you. Know that whatever you do will be the right thing. So God, I'm going to put my faith in you. See, that's why faith is the beginning of the journey. That's why Jesus said you must believe that I am He. That's why without faith it is impossible to please God, because it's faith that drives us to listen. But it's a faith that acts. It's a faith that says if God tells me I need to change, I'm going to change. I'm going to come back from the way that I was. It's a faith that tells me I'm going to put Him first. I'm going to listen to Him, that He's going to be my Lord, that I'm going to see who He is. And I will believe. It's a faith that listens and says, here's what I need you to do. Here's what I need you to obey. Here's my command. I need you to do what I tell you. Because it's when we act in faith and when we follow in faith and when we obey in faith and when we listen and do, we can allow God to do what He can do. If God can take and change that boy, He can change us as well. If He can help a father in his unbelief to have enough faith to trust and change a life, He can do it for us today. God can make something great happen if we're willing to believe. I don't know where your faith is today. Maybe it's struggling. Maybe it's a faith that needs to take action, to make a confession, to change your life. Maybe it's a faith that needs to commit and obey. There's an opportunity today. The steps of salvation are there. The path is laid out. It won't always be the easiest walk, but will be the walk that is worth it. Because the promises of God are sure. The question is, do you trust Him enough to believe in Him? Today, if you're subject to the invitation, today if you need to put on Christ in baptism, today if you need the prayers of your brothers and sisters in Christ, we want to offer you a chance to let that need be known right now while we sing this song of invitation.